The helicopter's rotors beat against the desert air as Marcus Chen pressed his hands against the wounded soldier's chest. Blood seeped through his fingers despite the pressure he applied. 3 tours in Afghanistan had taught him to work fast, but the shrapnel had torn through vital organs. The young Marine's eyes were wide with fear, looking up at Marcus like he held the keys to life itself. "Stay with me, Johnson," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The helicopter lurched as another rocket exploded nearby. "You're going home to that girlfriend of yours, remember?" Marcus had seen too many faces like this, young men and women who signed up to serve their country, only to find themselves bleeding out in the middle of nowhere. As a Navy SEAL medic, he'd learned to compartmentalize the horror. Save who you can, mourn later. That was the rule. The helicopter touched down at the forward operating base, and Marcus helped carry Johnson to the medical tent. The field surgeon took over, and Marcus stepped back, his job done for now. He peeled off his bloodied gloves and walked outside into the scorching afternoon heat. "Another rough one?" Staff Sergeant Rodriguez asked, offering Marcus a bottle of water. Marcus nodded, taking a long drink. "Kid's tough. He'll make it." He hoped he was right. In this job, hope was sometimes all you had. The base was buzzing with activity. Supply trucks rumbled past, kicking up clouds of dust. Soldiers hurried between buildings, their faces grim and focused. Everyone here had a job to do, and everyone understood the stakes. Marcus had been at this base for 6 months now, and he knew the rhythm of war. The quiet moments between operations when you could almost forget where you were. The sudden bursts of violence that reminded you death was always lurking nearby. The letters from home that kept you grounded in a world that seemed increasingly unreal. He thought about his sister Sarah back in California. She was a nurse at a children's hospital, saving lives in her own way. She worried about him constantly, sending care packages filled with his favorite snacks and books he'd never have time to read. In her last letter, she'd mentioned meeting someone new, a doctor at the hospital. Marcus was happy for her. She deserved someone who could be there for her, unlike him. Chen, the voice of his commanding officer, cut through his thoughts. "We've got another mission briefing in 10 minutes. Marcus crushed the empty water bottle and tossed it in a nearby bin. Back to work. He made his way to the briefing room, a converted shipping container with maps covering every wall. His team was already assembled, 8 of the best SEALs he'd ever worked with. They'd been through hell together, and they trusted each other with their lives. "Gentlemen," Colonel Harrison began, pointing to a map of the region, "we've got intelligence on a high-value target hiding in a compound about 20 miles north of here. The mission is capture or kill, but we need him alive if possible. He's got information about planned attacks on American assets." Marcus studied the satellite photos of the compound. It looked like a typical Afghan village house, but intelligence suggested it was heavily fortified. These missions were always dangerous, but that was what they'd trained for. "There's one complication," the colonel continued. "Intelligence suggests there may be civilians in the compound, including women and children. We need to be extremely careful about collateral damage." Marcus nodded. Protecting innocent civilians was always their top priority, even when it made their job exponentially more difficult. The rules of engagement were clear, and every SEAL understood them. After the briefing, Marcus checked his medical supplies. Bandages, morphine, surgical tools, everything he might need to keep his team alive if things went wrong. He'd lost count of how many times he'd used these supplies in combat. Each item represented a life potentially saved. A family that wouldn't get a visit from uniformed officers bearing bad news. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Despite everything, Marcus still found beauty in this harsh landscape. The way the light hit the rocky peaks, the vast emptiness of the desert stretching to the horizon. It was a reminder that there was still beauty in the world worth fighting for. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, a photo of her at the beach with her new boyfriend, both of them smiling and carefree. Marcus smiled despite himself. This was why he was here, to protect that kind of happiness, that kind of normal life that most people took for granted. "You ready for tomorrow, Doc?" his teammate Jake asked, using the nickname the team had given him. "Always," Marcus replied. It was true. No matter how many missions he'd been on, he approached each one with the same level of preparation and focus. Lives depended on it. The team spent the evening going over the mission plan, studying every detail of the compound and surrounding area. They discussed potential complications, escape routes, and contingency plans. By the time they finished, Marcus felt confident they were as prepared as they could be. He lay in his bunk that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the distant sounds of the base. Generators humming, guards making their rounds, the occasional radio chatter. These sounds had become familiar, almost comforting in their consistency. Tomorrow would bring another mission, another chance to put his training to the test. Marcus had long ago accepted that he might not make it home from one of these operations. It was the price of serving, the risk they all understood when they signed up. But tonight he was alive, his team was safe, and young Johnson was stable in the medical tent. In this job, you learn to appreciate small victories. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to get some sleep. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, whatever challenges awaited in that compound 20 miles north. He was ready for whatever lay ahead, just as he'd been trained to be. The mission began at 0200 hours under a moonless sky. Marcus and his team moved silently through the rocky terrain, their night vision goggles turning the darkness into shades of green. Each man carried specialized equipment, breaching charges, communications gear, weapons, and in Marcus's case, an expanded medical kit that could handle anything from minor cuts to traumatic injuries. They'd rehearsed this operation dozens of times back at base, using mock-ups and satellite imagery to familiarize themselves with every corner of the target compound. The intelligence suggested 12 to 15 hostile combatants inside, along with the high-value target they needed to capture alive. The presence of potential civilians made everything more complicated. 2 minutes to the perimeter, Jake whispered into his radio. As team leader, he coordinated their movements while Marcus stayed ready to provide medical support if anyone got hurt. Marcus checked his medical supplies one more time. In combat, seconds could mean the difference between life and death. He'd learned to work with whatever was available, sometimes performing life-saving procedures under enemy fire with nothing but basic field equipment. The compound appeared ahead of them, exactly as the satellite photos had shown. A main building surrounded by a high wall with 2 smaller outbuildings and what appeared to be a guard tower. Thermal imaging suggested most of the occupants were asleep, but they could see at least 2 guards patrolling the perimeter. Tango down, came the whispered confirmation as their sniper eliminated the first guard silently. A few seconds later, the second guard dropped as well. The team moved quickly to the compound wall. Marcus felt his heart rate increase slightly, the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with every operation. He'd learned to use this feeling, to let it sharpen his focus rather than overwhelm him. In his role as medic, staying calm under pressure wasn't just important. It was literally a matter of life and death for his teammates. The breaching charge exploded with a muffled thump, creating a hole in the compound wall large enough for the team to enter. They moved through and practiced formation, each man covering his assigned sector. Marcus stayed in the middle of the group, ready to respond if anyone needed medical attention. The first building was clear, just storage and supplies. The team moved toward the main house where their target was believed to be sleeping. Intelligence had suggested he'd be in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, but they needed to clear every room to ensure no threats remained. Movement on the 2nd floor, Jake reported quietly. 3 individuals, possibly armed. Marcus positioned himself behind cover as the team prepared to enter the building. This was always the most dangerous part, the moment when careful planning met unpredictable reality. No matter how much intelligence they gathered, there were always unknowns. The front door was locked, but Jake made quick work of it with a small explosive charge. The team flowed inside like water, each man knowing exactly where to go and what to do. Marcus followed, his weapon ready but his mind focused on the medical needs of his team. The ground floor was empty except for basic furniture and what appeared to be a small kitchen. The team moved toward the stairs, their footsteps silent despite their heavy gear. Years of training had taught them to move like ghosts when necessary. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the 2nd floor. Marcus heard Jake grunt and saw him stumble. Without thinking, Marcus moved forward, grabbing Jake and pulling him behind a concrete pillar as bullets chipped the walls around them. "I'm hit," Jake said through gritted teeth. Blood was spreading across his shoulder. Marcus's training took over. He quickly assessed the wound, a through-and-through bullet wound in the shoulder. Painful but not immediately life-threatening. He applied pressure to control the bleeding while the rest of the team returned fire at their attackers. "You're going to be fine," Marcus told Jake. his voice calm and reassuring despite the chaos around them. Clean wound missed the major arteries. You'll be back to annoying me in a few days. Jake managed a weak smile. Good to know, Doc. Now get up there and help the others finish this. Marcus quickly bandaged Jake's wound and gave him a shot of morphine for the pain. Then he grabbed his weapon and moved toward the stairs where his teammates were engaged in a fierce firefight with the compound's defenders. The next few minutes were a blur of gunfire, shouting, and the controlled chaos of urban combat. Marcus moved from room to room with his team, providing covering fire and staying ready to treat any injuries. His medical training had taught him to think clearly under pressure, and that skill served him well in combat situations. They finally cornered their high-value target in the master bedroom, along with 2 bodyguards who refused to surrender. The firefight was brief but intense. When the smoke cleared, both bodyguards were dead, and their target was wounded but alive. Marcus immediately moved to treat the target's wounds. The man had taken a bullet in the leg and was losing blood, but the injury wasn't fatal. As a medic, Marcus's duty was to save lives regardless of who the patient was. Enemy or ally, his job was to keep them alive. Please, the man said in accented English as Marcus worked on his leg. I have information. I can help you. Marcus didn't respond. His job was medical care, not interrogation. He focused on stopping the bleeding and stabilizing the wound for transport. The intelligence officers would handle questioning once they got back to base. As Marcus worked on the target, he heard Jake calling from downstairs.
Doc, we've got another problem down here.
Civilian casualty. Marcus's blood went cold. Civilian casualties were every soldier's nightmare, especially for medical personnel whose primary mission was to preserve life. He finished bandaging the target's leg and handed him over to another team member before rushing downstairs. What he found made his stomach drop. A young woman, probably in her early 20s, lay unconscious on the floor near the back of the house. She was dressed in traditional Afghan clothing, but something about her seemed different. Her hands showed calluses that didn't match her appearance as a typical village woman. Marcus quickly checked her vital signs. She was alive but had suffered a head injury, probably from falling debris when the firefight started. As he began treating her wounds, he noticed something that made him pause. Her muscle tone was too developed for someone who lived a sedentary village life. Her hands showed signs of weapons training. Who is she? Marcus asked one of his teammates. No idea. Found her hiding in a back room? Could be family, could be something else entirely. Marcus continued treating her injuries, but his mind was racing. Something about this woman didn't add up. In his experience, when things didn't add up in a combat zone, it usually meant trouble. But right now, his job was to keep her alive, regardless of who she might be. The helicopter ride back to base was tense. Marcus sat across from the unconscious woman, monitoring her vital signs while keeping one eye on their wounded high-value target. Jake's shoulder wound was stable, and he insisted on staying alert despite the morphine. The woman hadn't regained consciousness since they'd found her, which worried Marcus more than he wanted to admit. Doc, you seeing what I'm seeing? Jake asked quietly, nodding toward the woman. Marcus followed his gaze. Even unconscious, there was something about her posture that seemed wrong for a civilian. She lay too still, too controlled. Most people, especially civilians caught in combat, showed signs of distress even when unconscious. This woman seemed almost peaceful, as if she was simply choosing to remain asleep. I noticed it too, Marcus replied, checking her pulse again. Strong and steady, not what he'd expect from someone who'd suffered a head injury. Her breathing was too controlled, too measured. Every instinct he'd developed over 3 tours was telling him something wasn't right. The base came into view as the sun began to rise over the mountains. Marcus had always found this time of day beautiful in Afghanistan, when the harsh landscape was softened by the golden light of dawn. It reminded him that even in the middle of a war zone, there was still beauty in the world worth protecting. As soon as they landed, the wounded target was whisked away by intelligence officers. Jake was taken to the medical tent for proper treatment of his shoulder wound. That left Marcus with the mysterious woman, who still hadn't shown any signs of waking up. He carried her to the medical facility himself, noting again how her muscle tone suggested someone who was in excellent physical condition. Her hands had calluses in specific places that Marcus recognized from his own weapons training. This was definitely not an ordinary Afghan village woman. Dr. Sarah Williams, the base's chief medical officer, met them at the entrance to the medical facility. She was a no-nonsense army surgeon who'd been in Afghanistan for 8 months, and Marcus had developed tremendous respect for her skills and judgment. "What do we have, Marcus?" she asked, helping him transfer the woman to an examination table. Unconscious female, approximately 20 to 25 years old, found in the target compound. Head injury from debris, but her vitals are surprisingly stable. "Something feels off about her, Doc." Dr. Williams began her examination while Marcus stood by. As a SEAL medic, he had extensive training, but Dr. Williams was a fully qualified surgeon with years of experience. He'd learned to trust her instincts completely. "Interesting," Dr. Williams murmured as she examined the woman's hands. "These calluses are consistent with someone who's had extensive weapons training. And look at this muscle development in her forearms and shoulders. This woman is a fighter." Marcus nodded. He'd noticed the same things, but was glad to have his observations confirmed by someone with Dr. Williams's experience. In a war zone, assumptions could get you killed, but ignoring obvious warning signs could be just as dangerous. "Should we restrain her?" Marcus asked. "Let's see if she wakes up first. But stay close and keep your weapon ready." They didn't have to wait long. As Dr. Williams was completing her examination, the woman's eyes snapped open. Not the gradual awakening of someone emerging from unconsciousness, but the instant alertness of someone who'd been awake and listening the entire time. Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, but he stopped when he saw the woman's eyes. They were intelligent, calculating, and completely aware of her surroundings. She assessed the room, noted the locations of both Marcus and Dr. Williams, and identified potential exits in the space of a few seconds. "English?" Dr. Williams asked. The woman remained silent, but Marcus could see her processing the question. She understood what had been asked, but was choosing not to respond. Another red flag in a situation that was already setting off every alarm bell in his head. "We're here to help you," Marcus said softly. "You were injured in the compound. We brought you here for medical treatment." Still no response, but her eyes shifted to Marcus with what looked like recognition. Not recognition of him personally, but recognition of what he represented. She'd seen American military personnel before, he was certain of it. Dr. Williams tried a different approach, speaking slowly and using simple words. "You are safe now. We are doctors. We want to help you feel better." The woman's expression didn't change, but Marcus noticed her hand moving slightly. It was a subtle movement, the kind of thing most people wouldn't catch. But Marcus had been trained to notice details that could mean the difference between life and death. "Doc," he said quietly, "I think we need to restrain her. Something's not right here." Before Dr. Williams could respond, the woman moved. It happened so fast that Marcus almost missed it despite his training. She rolled off the examination table and landed in a combat crouch, her eyes scanning for weapons or escape routes. Marcus drew his sidearm but didn't point it at her. "Easy there. Nobody wants to hurt you. We just need you to stay calm." The woman straightened slowly, and Marcus got his first good look at her in proper lighting. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with the kind of lean muscle that came from years of physical training. Her eyes held the steady gaze of someone who'd seen combat before. "You speak English," Dr. Williams said. It wasn't a question. The woman remained silent, but Marcus could see her calculating. She was assessing the situation, looking for advantages and weaknesses. It was the behavior of someone with military or paramilitary training, not a civilian caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice calm and non-threatening. For the first time, the woman showed emotion, a flicker of something that might have been fear or uncertainty. But it was gone so quickly that Marcus almost thought he'd imagined it. "I know you understand me," Marcus continued. "We're not going to hurt you, but we need to know who you are and what you were doing in that compound." The woman's eyes met his, and for a moment, Marcus felt like she was looking straight through him. There was intelligence there and training, and something else he couldn't quite identify. She was evaluating him the same way he was evaluating her. "My name is Zara," she said finally, her English accented but clear. "I was visiting my uncle when your soldiers attacked." Marcus didn't believe her for a second. Everything about her body language, her movements, her awareness of her surroundings screamed military training. But at least she was talking now, which was progress. "What kind of work do you do, Zara?" Dr. Williams asked. "I help my family with their farm," Zara replied without hesitation. Another lie, Marcus was certain. Those calluses on her hands weren't from farm work. He'd grown up around agricultural workers and knew what that kind of manual labor did to hands. Zara's calluses were in all the wrong places for farming, but all the right places for someone who spent significant time training with weapons. Over the next 3 days, Zara remained in the medical facility under observation. Officially, she was being treated for her head injury, but Marcus knew the real reason was that intelligence officers wanted time to figure out who she really was. Her story about being a farmer visiting her uncle didn't hold up under scrutiny, but she stuck to it with impressive consistency. Marcus found himself assigned to watch over her during his off-duty hours. It wasn't an official assignment, more of a request from Dr. Williams, who'd noticed that Zara seemed more relaxed when Marcus was around. For some reason, the mysterious woman appeared to trust him more than the other personnel on base. "You don't believe I'm a farmer," Zara said during one of their conversations. She was sitting on the edge of her bed looking remarkably composed for someone who was essentially being held prisoner. "Should I?" Marcus replied. He'd learned not to answer her questions directly. She was too good at extracting information while giving nothing in return. Zara smiled for the first time since they'd brought her to the base. It transformed her face completely, making her look younger and less guarded. "You're very careful with your words. That's good training." "What kind of training would you know about?" Marcus asked, keeping his tone casual. "The kind that keeps you alive," she replied, the smile fading. Marcus studied her face, looking for tells that might give away what she was really thinking. She had excellent control over her expressions, better than most trained operatives he'd encountered. Whatever her background was, she'd had serious instruction in counterintelligence techniques. "Where did you learn English?" Marcus asked, changing tactics. "School," Zara answered immediately.
Many Afghan children learn English in school now. It was plausible, but her accent was wrong.
Marcus had worked with plenty of Afghan interpreters and local personnel during his deployments. Zara's English had a different quality to it, more refined and precise. She'd learned from native speakers, not from textbooks in a village school. Dr. Williams appeared in the doorway. "Marcus, can I see you for a moment?" Marcus followed her out into the hallway, leaving Zara under the watch of a guard who'd been stationed outside her room since day one. "Intelligence just finished running her fingerprints," Dr. Williams said quietly. "You're not going to believe what they found." "Try me," Marcus replied, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew this wasn't going to be good news. "Her name isn't Zara, and she's not Afghan. She's actually Zara Petrov, born in Chechnya, former Russian Special Forces, specialized in reconnaissance and infiltration. She's been listed as missing in action for 2 years. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Russian Special Forces. That explained everything. The muscle tone, the calluses, the way she moved, her ability to control her expressions and responses. She wasn't just trained, she was one of the best trained operatives in the world. What's a former Russian Special Forces operator doing in an Afghan compound with a high-value target? Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. That's what intelligence is trying to figure out. But Marcus, there's more. Her psychological profile suggests she's been through some kind of severe trauma. The working theory is that she might have been captured and turned, or possibly went rogue and is working as a freelance operative. Marcus thought about the conversations he'd had with Zara over the past 3 days. She'd been careful, but he'd noticed moments when her guard seemed to slip, flashes of what looked like genuine emotion, particularly when the conversation touched on family or loss. If she'd been through trauma, she was hiding it well, but the signs were there if you knew what to look for. "What does this mean for her status here?" Marcus asked. "That's above my pay grade," Dr. Williams replied, "but I suspect she's going to be moved to a more secure facility soon. Intelligence wants to find out what she knows and who she's working for." Marcus nodded, but he felt troubled by the news. Over the past 3 days, he'd begun to see glimpses of the person behind the operative. Zara was clearly dangerous and highly trained, but there was something about her that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with whatever situation she'd found herself in. When he returned to her room, Zara looked up at him with those intelligent eyes. "You know who I am now," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus sat down in the chair beside her bed. There was no point in denying it. "Zara Petrov, former Russian Spetsnaz. The question is, what are you doing here?" For the first time since they'd found her, Zara's composure cracked slightly. Marcus saw something flash across her face, pain, maybe, or regret. It was gone quickly, but it was enough to confirm what Dr. Williams had said about trauma. That's a complicated question, Zara said finally. I've got time, Marcus replied. Zara was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes held a vulnerability that Marcus hadn't seen before. 2 years ago, my unit was deployed to Syria, she began. We were supposed to be advisors, helping the Syrian government forces. But the mission went wrong. Very wrong. Marcus waited patiently. He'd learned that sometimes the best way to get information was simply to listen. We were betrayed by someone in our own command structure. My entire unit was ambushed. I was the only survivor. Zara's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the pain underneath. When I made it back to base, I found out the betrayal went all the way to the top. People I trusted, people I'd served with for years, had sold us out. So you went rogue, Marcus said. I disappeared, Zara corrected. I couldn't trust anyone in the military hierarchy, so I vanished. I've been freelancing ever since, taking contracts from whoever pays well and doesn't ask too many questions about my past. And the high-value target we captured? Zara's expression hardened. He was my client. He hired me to provide security for a meeting with potential buyers for information he claimed to have about American military operations. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of information? I don't know, Zara said, meeting his eyes. And I didn't want to know. I was there to provide security, not to participate in whatever he was selling. But when your team attacked, I realized I might have made a terrible mistake. Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Her story was plausible, and it explained how a former Russian Special Forces operator had ended up in an Afghan compound. But it also raised new questions about what she might know and whether she could be trusted. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked. Zara was quiet for another long moment. Because I think you might be the first person in 2 years who's looked at me and seen a human being instead of just a weapon or a threat. The intelligence officers arrived the next morning to transfer Zara to a more secure facility. Marcus watched from his office window as they loaded her into an armored vehicle, her hands restrained with high-security cuffs designed for dangerous prisoners. She didn't look back at the medical facility, but something about her posture suggested resignation rather than defeat. Colonel Harrison called Marcus into his office an hour later. The colonel was a career military man who'd served in every major conflict of the past 20 years. He had the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much war, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him an effective commander. I hear you've been spending time with our Russian friend, the colonel said without preamble. Yes, sir. Dr. Williams asked me to monitor her condition while she was in medical. And what's your assessment? Marcus chose his words carefully. She's highly trained and potentially dangerous, but I don't think she's an immediate threat to base security. Her story about going rogue after her unit was betrayed seems credible. Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair. The intelligence boys think she might be valuable. Someone with her background and skills could provide significant insight into Russian special operations tactics. Are they planning to recruit her? Marcus asked. That depends on whether they think she can be trusted, and frankly, your opinion might carry some weight in that decision. She seems to have developed some level of trust in you. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What he said next could determine whether Zara spent the rest of the war in a detention facility, or whether she might be given a chance to redeem herself. Sir, in my professional opinion, she's been through significant trauma. The betrayal of her unit, losing everyone she served with, having to survive on her own for 2 years. That changes a person. But I think underneath all the training and the defenses, she still has a moral compass. Moral compass doesn't mean much if she's working for the highest bidder, the colonel pointed out. No, sir, but it might mean something if she was given a better option. The colonel studied Marcus for a long moment. You think she could be turned? I think she's already turned, sir. She just doesn't know it yet. When she realized what her client might have been selling, she was genuinely disturbed. That suggests her moral compass is still functioning. 3 days later, Marcus was surprised to receive orders to report to a classified location 50 miles from the base. He was even more surprised when he arrived to find Zara sitting across a table from 2 intelligence officers, no longer in restraints. Sergeant Chen, one of the officers said, standing as Marcus entered the room. Thank you for coming. We'd like you to participate in a conversation with Miss Petrov. Marcus took a seat at the table. Zara looked up at him and he saw something in her eyes that might have been relief. She looked tired, and he suspected she'd been through several days of intensive questioning. "They want to offer me a deal," Zara said without preamble. "Cooperation in exchange for a new identity and relocation to the United States after the war ends." "What kind of cooperation?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Intelligence about Russian special operations tactics, training methods, and operational procedures," one of the officers explained. "Miss Petrov has agreed to provide detailed briefings to our special operations personnel. Her knowledge could save American lives." Marcus looked at Zara. "And what do you want?" "I want to stop running," she said quietly. "I want to stop looking over my shoulder and wondering who's going to betray me next. But I also want to know that what I'm doing matters, that it's not just trading one master for another." "There's more to the deal," the second intelligence officer said. "We'd like Miss Petrov to participate in joint training exercises with our special operations teams. Her skills could help us prepare for future encounters with Russian-trained operatives." Marcus understood what they were really asking. They wanted Zara to help train American special forces to fight against people like her former comrades. It was a difficult moral position, but it was also an opportunity for her to use her skills for something she could believe in. "What do you think, Marcus?" Zara asked. "You're the only person here I trust to give me an honest answer." Marcus considered his words carefully. "I think you've been looking for a way to redeem yourself ever since your unit was betrayed. This could be that chance. You'd be helping protect people who can't protect themselves, which is what you signed up for when you first joined the military." Zara nodded slowly. "And you? Would you be part of this training program?" "If ordered to, yes," Marcus replied. "But I'd want to be part of it regardless. You could teach us things that might keep my teammates alive." Over the following weeks, Zara began working with Marcus's team and other special operations units on the base. Her knowledge of Russian tactics and training methods was invaluable, and she proved to be an excellent instructor. She was demanding and precise, pushing the American soldiers to think differently about combat situations. Marcus found himself working closely with her, translating her knowledge into practical medical scenarios. How would a Russian-trained operative try to escape if wounded? What kind of medical knowledge might they have? How could American medics be better prepared to treat both friendly and enemy casualties in complex combat situations? "You're a good teacher," Marcus told her after a particularly intensive training session. "So are you," Zara replied. "Your medical knowledge is impressive. In Russia, we learned basic field medicine, but nothing as comprehensive as your training." They were walking back from the training area as the sun set over the mountains. Despite the circumstances that had brought them together, Marcus found himself enjoying these conversations. Zara was intelligent and insightful, and when she let her guard down, she had a dry sense of humor that reminded him that underneath the training and trauma, she was still human. "Do you ever miss it?" Marcus asked. "Your old life before everything went wrong?" Zara was quiet for a moment. "I miss the certainty," she said finally. "When I was part of a unit, part of something bigger than myself, I knew who I was and what I was supposed to do. These past 2 years I've felt lost most of the time, and now I feel like I might be finding my way again. It's different than before, but maybe that's not a bad thing." Marcus understood what she meant. His own certainty about his role and mission had been tested by years of combat. The simple clarity of serving your country became more complicated when you saw the human cost of war up close, when you treated wounded enemies and watched young soldiers die far from home. "Change isn't always bad," Marcus agreed. "Sometimes it's the only way to grow." 6 weeks into the training program, everything changed. Marcus was in the medical tent, treating a soldier who'd been injured during a routine patrol when the alarm started blaring across the base. The sound sent an immediate chill down his spine. It was the signal for an imminent attack. "All personnel to defensive positions," came the announcement over the base's communication system. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Marcus quickly finished bandaging the soldier's leg and helped him to a secure area of the medical facility. Through the tent's entrance, he could see soldiers running to their assigned positions, weapons ready. The base had been attacked before, but something about this felt different. The intelligence reports had been quiet lately, with no indication of major enemy activity in the area. Jake appeared at the entrance to the medical tent, his shoulder still in a sling from their mission weeks earlier. "Doc, we need you ready for casualties." Intelligence thinks this might be a major coordinated assault. Marcus grabbed his field medical kit and prepared for what could be a long night. Base attacks were always chaotic, with wounded soldiers arriving at unpredictable intervals. His job was to keep people alive long enough for proper surgical treatment, making split-second decisions about who could be saved and who was beyond help. The first explosions came 20 minutes later. Mortar rounds landed near the motor pool, sending up clouds of smoke and debris. Marcus could hear the distinctive sound of small arms fire as the base's defenders engaged targets beyond the perimeter. "Incoming wounded," someone shouted, and Marcus saw two soldiers carrying a third man between them. The wounded soldier was conscious but bleeding heavily from his leg. Marcus immediately went to work, applying pressure to control the bleeding while assessing the extent of the damage. The wound was serious but manageable, the kind of injury that would end someone's deployment but wouldn't kill them if treated properly. As he worked, Marcus caught sight of Zara running past the medical tent. She was carrying a rifle and wearing combat gear, moving with the fluid efficiency he'd observed during their training sessions. For a moment he wondered what she was doing. Officially, she was still a detainee working under a cooperation agreement, not a combatant. "Where's she going?" Marcus asked Jake, Colonel's orders. "She requested permission to help defend the base. Apparently, she knows something about the attackers' tactics." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. Zara's skills were undeniable, but putting her in combat alongside American forces was a huge risk. If she decided to switch sides again, she could do enormous damage from inside the base's defenses. The attack intensified over the next hour. Marcus treated a steady stream of wounded soldiers, ranging from minor shrapnel wounds to serious injuries that required immediate surgical intervention. Dr. Williams worked beside him, her hands steady despite the chaos around them. "Multiple casualties incoming from the north gate," someone called out, and Marcus looked up to see Jake helping to carry in two badly wounded soldiers. One of them was unconscious, blood seeping through his uniform from multiple wounds. The other was awake but in shock, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. Marcus immediately began triaging, determining which soldier needed attention first. The unconscious soldier had taken shrapnel to his chest and abdomen. Marcus quickly checked his vitals and realized the man was bleeding internally. Without immediate surgery, he would die within minutes. The second soldier had a serious leg wound but was stable. "Dr. Williams, I need you here now," Marcus called out, beginning chest compressions on the unconscious soldier. As they worked to stabilize the critically wounded soldier, Marcus heard a commotion outside the medical tent. Voices were shouting in what sounded like a foreign language, and the pattern of gunfire was changing. "The attackers have breached the perimeter," Jake reported, appearing at the tent entrance with his weapon ready. "They're inside the base." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. A breach meant the attackers could reach the medical facility, where the most vulnerable personnel were located. He had wounded soldiers who couldn't be moved, and medical staff who were focused on saving lives rather than defending themselves. "Can you hold them off?" Marcus asked, not looking up from his patient. "We're trying, but they seem to know exactly where to hit us. It's like they have detailed intelligence about our defensive positions." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. The attackers had inside knowledge of the base's layout and defenses. That kind of intelligence could only come from someone who'd spent significant time studying their operations, or someone who'd been inside the base and observed their procedures. Suddenly, Zara appeared at the tent entrance. Her rifle was smoking and there was blood on her uniform, though Marcus couldn't tell if it was hers or someone else's. "The attackers are using Russian tactics," she said urgently. "Small unit infiltration, designed to cause maximum confusion while avoiding direct confrontation with your main defensive positions." "How do you know that?" Jake asked, his weapon pointed in her general direction. "Because I helped develop some of these tactics," Zara replied, "and because I recognized two of the attackers. They're Chechen separatists, probably trained by the same people who trained me." Marcus felt everything click into place. The timing of the attack, the sophisticated tactics, the detailed knowledge of the base's defenses. This wasn't a coincidental assault by local insurgents. Someone had specifically targeted this base, possibly because they knew Zara was here. "They're here for you," Marcus said, looking at Zara. "I think so," she admitted. "My former commanders probably consider me a security risk." If they can't bring me back, they'll want to eliminate me before I can provide more intelligence to the Americans. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. The attack wasn't just about military objectives. It was a targeted assassination attempt, and everyone on the base was at risk because they were harboring Zara. "What do we do?" Jake asked. Zara checked her weapon and looked toward the sounds of combat outside. "We finish what they started, but I need you to know. If they capture me alive, they'll torture me for everything I've told you. I won't let that happen." Marcus understood what she was saying. If the situation became hopeless, Zara would rather die fighting than be taken prisoner. It was a pragmatic decision from someone who knew exactly what her former allies were capable of. "Then we make sure they don't capture you," Marcus said, grabbing his own sidearm. "Jake, can you coordinate with the other defensive positions? We need to know where the attackers are and how many we're dealing with." As Jake moved to establish communication with the base's command center, Marcus found himself alone with Zara for a moment. She was checking her equipment with the methodical precision of someone preparing for what might be her final battle. "I'm sorry," she said without looking up. "I never wanted to put you and your friends in danger." "You didn't choose this," Marcus replied. "Your former commanders did when they decided to betray your unit." Zara looked at him then, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. A kind of peace, as if she'd finally found a cause worth dying for. It was the look of someone who'd stopped running and decided to make a stand. The sound of gunfire was getting closer to the medical tent. Whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen soon. The final assault came at dawn. Marcus had spent the night moving between treating wounded soldiers and helping defend the medical facility. Zara had proven invaluable, using her knowledge of the attackers' tactics to predict their movements and coordinate countermeasures. Despite everything, the base's defenders were holding their ground. Marcus was changing the bandages on a wounded soldier when he heard Jake's voice crackle over the radio. "Doc, we've got a problem. 3 attackers are moving on the medical facility from the east. They've got heavy weapons." Through the tent's entrance, Marcus could see muzzle flashes in the pre-dawn darkness. The attackers had waited until most of the base's defenders were exhausted from fighting all night, then launched their final push toward the most vulnerable target. "How long until reinforcements arrive?" Marcus asked into his radio. 10 minutes, maybe 15, came the reply from the command center. "Can you hold that long?" Marcus looked around the medical facility. He had 6 wounded soldiers who couldn't be moved, Dr. Williams and 2 nurses, plus Jake and himself for defense. Against 3 trained operatives with heavy weapons, their chances weren't good. "Zara," Marcus called out, "we need your expertise." She appeared beside him, moving with the silent efficiency that had become familiar over the past weeks. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes were alert and focused. 3 attackers, probably Spetsnaz trained, Marcus reported. "They're coming from the east with heavy weapons. What would you do in their position?" Zara studied the layout of the medical facility, her tactical mind working through the possibilities. "They'll try to pin us down with suppressing fire, then use grenades to clear the building. Quick and efficient, minimal risk to themselves. How do we stop them?" "We don't play defense," Zara said. "We take the fight to them before they can establish their firing positions." Marcus felt his stomach drop. What she was suggesting was essentially a suicide mission. 3 trained operators with heavy weapons against a medic, a wounded soldier, and a former Russian operative who'd been out of active combat for 2 years. "That's insane," Jake said, overhearing the conversation. "It's tactically sound," Zara corrected. "They're expecting us to hunker down and wait for rescue. If we attack them while they're moving into position, we might catch them off guard." Marcus looked at the wounded soldiers under his care. These men had trusted him to keep them alive, and now he was considering leaving them to join what could be a hopeless assault. But if Zara was right, staying here meant everyone would die anyway. "Dr. Williams," Marcus called out, "can you handle casualties without me for a few minutes?" "Marcus, don't be ridiculous," she replied, not looking up from the soldier she was treating. "You're not a combat soldier." "No, but I'm the only backup Zara has." Dr. Williams looked up then, and Marcus saw understanding in her eyes. She knew as well as he did that their only chance was to stop the attackers before they reached the medical facility. "Be careful," she said simply. Marcus grabbed his rifle and extra ammunition. He wasn't a sniper like some of his teammates, but he was competent with his weapon. More importantly, he trusted Zara's tactical judgment completely. They moved out through the back of the medical facility, using the pre-dawn darkness for cover. Zara led the way, her movements fluid and silent. Marcus followed, trying to match her stealth despite his heavier medical gear. "There," Zara whispered, pointing toward a cluster of supply containers about 50 meters away. "Two of them are setting up a machine gun position. The third is probably moving to flank us from the south." Marcus could barely make out the shapes she was indicating, but her trained eyes had spotted them immediately. This was what years of special operations training looked like in practice. The ability to see threats that others would miss. "What's the plan?" Marcus asked. "You take the machine gun team. I'll handle the flanker, wait for my signal, then put as much accurate fire on their position as possible. Don't try to be a hero. Just keep them pinned down until reinforcements arrive." Zara melted into the shadows, leaving Marcus alone with his rifle and a target he could barely see. He found a stable shooting position behind a concrete barrier and lined up his sights on the area where she'd spotted the machine gun team. The waiting was the worst part. Marcus's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it over the distant sounds of gunfire. His hands were steady. Years of performing medical procedures under pressure had taught him to control his nerves. But his mind was racing through everything that could go wrong. A single gunshot cracked through the air from the south. Zara engaging the flanker. That was Marcus's signal. He began firing controlled bursts at the machine gun position, not trying to hit specific targets but forcing the operators to keep their heads down. The machine gun team returned fire, bullets whining off the concrete around Marcus's position, but they were firing blind, unable to establish the precise firing position they'd planned. Marcus kept up his suppressing fire, changing positions every few rounds to avoid giving them a clear target. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. Zara crying out in pain from somewhere in the darkness. She'd been hit, and Marcus had no idea how badly. Every instinct he'd developed as a medic screamed at him to abandon his position and go help her. But he knew that's exactly what the attackers would expect. If he left his firing position, the machine gun team would be free to advance on the medical facility. Marcus forced himself to keep firing, even as he heard more sounds of combat from Zara's direction. Short bursts of gunfire, then silence, then more shooting. He couldn't tell who was winning. "Doc," Jake's voice came over the radio. "Reinforcements are 2 minutes out. Can you hold your position?" "I'm okay," Marcus replied, "but Zara's in trouble. Stay where you are. Help is coming." 2 minutes felt like an hour. Marcus continued his suppressing fire, watching his ammunition count drop steadily. The machine gun team was trying to advance, but every time they moved, Marcus forced them back into cover. Then he heard the distinctive sound of helicopters approaching, the base's quick reaction force arriving to deal with the remaining attackers. Marcus saw muzzle flashes from the south as fresh troops engaged the infiltrators. The shooting stopped abruptly. Marcus waited another few seconds, then slowly rose from his firing position. His ears were ringing from the gunfire and his hands were shaking from adrenaline. "Zara," he called out, moving toward the area where he'd last heard combat. He found her leaning against a supply container, blood seeping through her shirt. She was conscious but pale, her breathing shallow. The body of a Chechen operative lay nearby, testimony to her final victory. "How bad?" Marcus asked, immediately switching into medic mode as he began assessing her wounds. "Bad enough," Zara replied weakly. "Bullet caught me in the side. I think it missed the vital organs, but I'm losing blood." Marcus quickly cut away her shirt to examine the wound. The bullet had indeed missed her major organs, but it had torn through muscle and created significant bleeding. It was serious but treatable if he could get her to the medical facility quickly. "You did good," Marcus told her as he applied pressure to control the bleeding. "You saved everyone in that medical tent." "I finally did something right," Zara said, managing a weak smile. "It feels good to be on the right side again." As Marcus worked to stabilize her wounds, he realized something had fundamentally changed. Zara had proven herself in the most definitive way possible, by risking her life to protect people she barely knew. Whatever doubts anyone might have had about her loyalty were gone now. "Come on," Marcus said, helping her to her feet. "Let's get you patched up properly. Dr. Williams is going to want to run some tests." As they walked slowly back toward the medical facility, Zara leaning on Marcus for support, she spoke quietly. "What happens now?" After I recover? Marcus thought about the question. The attack had changed everything. Zara had moved from being a potential asset to being a proven ally. Someone who'd bled alongside American forces in defense of innocent people. Now you get to decide what kind of life you want to build, Marcus replied. You're not running anymore. You're not hiding from your past. You're free to choose your own future. Zara nodded slowly, and Marcus could see some of the tension leaving her shoulders. For the first time since they'd found her in that Afghan compound, she looked truly at peace. The sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Despite everything they'd been through, Marcus still found beauty in this harsh landscape. It reminded him that no matter how dark things got, there was always the possibility of a new dawn. As they reached the medical facility, Dr. Williams rushed out to meet them. Let's get her inside and see what we're dealing with, she said, helping Marcus support Zara. Marcus knew that Zara would recover from her wounds. More importantly, he knew she'd found something she'd been searching for since her unit was betrayed. A new purpose, a new family, and a chance to use her skills for something she could believe in. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the people who appeared to be your enemies turned out to be your greatest allies. It just took the right circumstances to reveal who they really were underneath all the training and trauma. Zara had proven herself when it mattered most, and that was something no one could ever take away from her.